still watching Wake Up Sierra Leone here on AYV. We're live on channel 33, live on radio 101.7 FM, and on our DSTV channel 399. In the second segment, according to the 2023 Citizens Manifesto that has been launched by the Institute for Governance Reform, IGR, which sorts out citizens' demand of their leaders in the upcoming election, 50% employment opportunities for young people and road infrastructure, which ranked top with 24.9%, are some of the issues some citizens want political parties to prioritize in their manifesto. So this morning, to look into the document, among other things, we have Andrew Lavalley, Executive Director for IGR. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Yeah, good morning, Elizabeth. Good morning, viewers.
Okay, so now just before we delve into the specifics of the 2023 Citizens Manifesto, give us a little bit of idea, how did the idea come about in putting up a Citizens Manifesto?
In the first place, this is not just an IGR initiative. This is an initiative of, a broad coalition of civil society, quite about the biggest in the country's history. And we can, this initiative started way back in 2017. Ahead of the 2018 elections. Remember, there was this song, My Vote's My Life. So it came out of the understanding that there is need for elections or voting to translate into better welfare. Because, during elections, that's the time that people get a bigger conversation on how the country can move forward in the next 5 years. So conversations around health, around education, around water. So normally we require political parties to develop policy proposals for citizens to vote on. So normally they put these policy proposals on the ballot. So you do not vote for your tribe, you actually vote for policy proposals that are on the ballot. So for example, what should make you better off in terms of healthcare, in terms of education. So, but we realize that Sierra Leone is ethno-regionally divided, and too often people vote on ethnic lines. So this idea came as to how do we ensure that the vote of citizens actually translates into better welfare. So hence we have the idea of a Citizens Manifesto. My vote's not my life, my vote is my life. Okay. So it was developed in 2017 towards 2018, and mark you, the manifesto commitments at the time, we looked at 7 proposals in 2018. One was asset declaration by politicians, dedicating 40% of political party ticket symbols to women, 15% to young people, openness in campaign financing. So we wanted this, we achieved this. There was a particular recommendation on recommendation 7 on what happens in the first year or in the first year or years of the next regime, things like dedicating 20% of the budget to education, 20% of the budget to health care, repealing the seditious libel law. So there are things that we achieved. So we wanted 20% in education. We ended up getting 22% budget allocation to education. 20% was the health care. We ended up getting 11%. It's actually moved from 8% to 11%. So this criminal libel law was repealed. Of course, there are certain things that were not achieved. For example, publication of assets by parliamentarians and political party aspirants, that was not achieved. So then we want to institutionalize this process where citizens develop their policy proposals, and then we campaign political parties. Really, they do not just campaign to us, we are actually campaigning to them. Include this in your manifesto. And there is a method to that. We do this because once the citizens, political parties adopt these manifesto proposals, it becomes an accountability tool once you're in government. So for example, that's why when we canvass the opinion, 800 opinion leaders across Sierra Leone, a number of them were saying, number one priority is jobs for young people.
Okay, so sorry, with regards to this year's Citizens Manifesto, how did you, before you talk about what the priorities were, how did you come about getting the representation from the people? What was the methodology you used to put together the Citizens Manifesto?
So it's the same methodology applied in 2017, 2018 is the same in this year as well. So ahead of the manifesto development, we do a poll. So in this year's manifesto, the poll is more robust than the last one. We actually interviewed 2,400 respondents countrywide as to what their priorities are. A number of people in Freetown were saying we need water. Across the country, people were saying we need, the next government should focus on keeping prices down. So they are concerned about security. So they are concerns about roads. So we, in the context of little, everything becomes a priority. So what we did was to further prioritize those priorities. So that's why the next level of the Citizens Manifesto preparation was to do what we called district level consultations. So every district, all the districts were treated equally. Unfortunately, in research, you don't go by that because Bond can never be equal to Freetown. But that was how it is. So in each district, we consulted 50 opinion leaders, and then they voted on the manifesto promises. So if you look into the Citizens Manifesto, you can actually see the pictures of the participatory approaches as to how this manifesto resolutions were made. So for example, there was one resolution of youth employment. There was one resolution on policing. And you know, before going further, it's really important to see why is it that people are talking about electricity, people are talking about roads, they are talking about water. Why are we talking about policing? What's the relationship? So we ask ourselves, it's easier for politicians to say, I'll give you water. It's easier for them to say, I'll give you roads. But it's difficult for them to say, I will change my behavior for me to be effective in delivering that. So the Citizens Manifesto actually has two components. One component is the policy priorities of citizens, and the other component is the institutional behavior change that is required. So in doing this, we had two components of institutional behavior change. One is, what do we require of citizens themselves? That is what we call the supply side. What are citizens going to do to change? Because when you come in to think of it, most of the people you see in government are one of us. We are not getting people from a different planet. They are random Sierra Leoneans on the street that becomes ministers, that become presidents. So if there is something that is fundamentally wrong with our society, we need to look inward to change that. So in this Dear Citizens Manifesto, we are saying we want the next administration to do 6 things, and we want citizens themselves to do 6 things. And we want those 12 things to be achieved by 2026. So the 6 things we want, for example, for citizens, which is the demand side. How do you stop throwing debt on the street? How do you stop putting pressure on people that are lawyers, that are police officers? How do you stop doing that? Because too often we say the justice system is not working, but we either influence the judges or we try to bribe them to make decisions in our favor. So what's going to be the demand side? What are you going to change your attitude regarding that? How are you going to stop bribing police officers if you are saying police officers are taking bribe? So on our part, there are 6 things. They may appear simple as saying, when are you going to stop begging politicians? Because if you want to have ethical leadership, you cannot ask politicians for what they cannot afford. So those are the 6 things, and this is really one big distinction between this year's manifesto and the manifesto in 2018. In 2018, we just asked politicians, declare your asset, do this, and we were left off the hook.
In fact, that's what I wanted to ask, because in the 2018 Citizens Manifesto, citizens policy priorities, there were 12 of them. Focusing on water, livelihoods, economy, health, education, infrastructure, farming, transport, governance, housing, security, and land tenure. In your introductory, you just mentioned that some figures were clamored for example, in education, and those figures were met, or even 2% adding on to those figures with regards to budget allocation. Is it safe to say that this year's manifesto will look at those areas, but not as priority as they were in 2018.
Definitely. So if you have children at home and they need clothes, they need food, if you buy food for them, they will say, I need clothes. So citizens, not that citizens are unappreciative. In the last Citizens Manifesto, education was a top priority. It's not anymore, because Sierra Leone is really on a top upward trajectory to achieving that. So you can see that in the last Citizens Manifesto, we said give 40% symbol allocation to women. The GUI bill has been passed. So that cannot be an ask anymore. So the focus is shifting on things like how do we get policing more effective? How do we get leaders? How do we create inclusivity? I mean, we know what happened in Bombali just a week ago, the gunning down of a police officer. So how do we ensure that we get along? So that's why citizens are suggesting that whoever wins this election, national cohesion should be key. Resources should be distributed equitably, in the sense that whoever wins, because the first indicator for resource distribution in Sierra Leone for many people is political appointment. Who is in government, who is not in. Where do I stand in relation to the state? So that's why the Citizens Manifesto is suggesting that whoever wins the next administration, not more than 30% and not less than 15% of appointments should go to one region. And by regions, we mean the south, the east, the north, the northwest, and the western region. So none of them should get above 30% and below 15% of the appointments.
And again, looking at what this year's priorities are, or the focus on youth employment, let's start with that one, and with the percentage there. Again, these are what citizens are going to ask. At the end of the day, it is expectant of any of these political parties who might be going to State House to ensure that this is not only part of their plan, but also a priority. As you stated, education was key among the priorities in 2018, and it was also key among the priorities of this present administration. What if citizens' priority are not aligning with what these political parties' priorities are? How do you ensure that you tell political parties, or you draw their attention to what citizens are demanding or what citizens are expecting of them?
Yes, so when we launched yesterday, we knew for sure that the challenge just started. So the first action we're having is how do we ensure that we influence political parties to factor these priorities into their manifesto? So because the manifestos are the accountability tool for citizens. You said you are going to do this. Are you going to do it? So the Citizens Manifesto by itself is not an accountability tool. So first is how do you influence political parties to do that? And second is how do we even influence the budget process, the planning process for the next administration, to ensure that those priorities are actually funded. I think that's where we missed the ball in the last Citizens Manifesto. We designed a very good document and we thought political parties would just be responsive to it. And we never realized that we needed to do an extra legwork to ensure that these priorities are not just our priorities, but they are actually acted upon. So it's not just a matter of luck. You actually need to walk the talk.
And our political parties, given a word into having most of what, or if not all, but most of what citizens are expecting of them in their manifesto, because we're yet to see their manifesto out, and most of the time we'll say the manifestos are almost always similar. There are issues of economic, and the concern will be, of course, projected in their manifesto. But ensuring that priority areas are also captured, are we going to have their word for it? Is that engagement from IGR to the political parties going to ensure that they indeed look at what citizens have stated? Because if the Citizens Manifesto is coming out before political parties' manifesto, by all indication, it is incumbent that political parties should look at this Citizens Manifesto now to inform their decision in their manifesto.
Definitely, and this is where we actually need civil society media partnership, because some of the things we're flagging, if people say one of the priorities is to reduce the number of police officers off the streets and introduce traffic lights, and maybe that will really reduce the interface between ordinary citizens and police officers, that becomes a conversation for this election. So it becomes a conversation for SLPP and APC. How are you going to ensure that we increase trust between citizens and the police? We just saw the report that came out yesterday, and it's really in sync with what the Citizens Manifesto is saying. The August 10 riots, the shooting, the gunning down of police officers. Ever since the war ended, I think this is the first time in 7 months we've seen 7-8 police officers actually gone down. So it means it's something that is worthy of special notice for conversation. So it's not, we're not conjuring things from space. We are sharing our lived circumstances and requesting that we need to have political will to address those situations. So I know political parties are always responsive when they know that this is what voters want. So that's why the Citizens Manifesto is produced way ahead of the party manifestos. And by the way, it's really a way of reducing violence. Because the more we talk about issues, the more we minimize the need for anyone to fight. Because it's really, how do we get the political parties, APC and SLPP, to talk about how are you going to achieve 50% employment? What's your strategy? Instead of inciting young people to fight, how are you going to ensure that they get jobs? And we encourage young people to really sit down by the radio and television to listen to those arguments. So we believe that's how politics and elections should be. So that's why the Citizens Manifesto, the mantra of the manifesto is to make elections meaningful. At the end of the day, you always vote. We've been voting. But how are we going to ensure that our economy, our systems are resilient and productive?
Now, speaking on the priority areas, I want to go deep down into what citizens are expecting, even though there is this broader umbrella perspective to say we want 50% employment of youth, or we want road infrastructure. Is there any way IGR as an institution will go deep down into the perception of the people who are surveyed to ensure that where do you need, let's say, for example, this road infrastructure or youth employment, so that there will not be an imbalance when there is youth employment? It's only concentrated in a particular stronghold of a particular political party, or allegations of saying a particular tribe when a particular political party is in power, or when you say road construction, it is not concentrated in a particular region. Will there be further inquiries or survey to ensure, or to dig deep as to, when you say road infrastructure, for example, where are the necessities? Where do we really need these roads? Not just to say road infrastructure and then you come and put all the roads in Freetown. There are other areas that need roads as well.
So I'm praying for a time when we begin to measure the percentage of road constructed and the percentage not constructed, not as to where the roads are going, but because we need roads everywhere. So it's good always to say we only have 20% of roads constructed as a country. We have 80% more to go. And I take your point. For that 80%, you don't have all the monies for that 80%. Maybe you may have monies for 15% more. Where are you going to, deploy roads in those 15%? And that's where the roads, the economy and jobs, that's where there is a clear connections. There has been this conversation around what they call the growth poles. So if you put roads in areas where there is growth, where you expect growth, you expect to increase jobs. So there's really a correlation. It's not just about rewarding your supporters with roads. It's really putting roads where there's an analysis that if you invest in roads here, you can create jobs, you can create interaction, not only within Sierra Leone, but even between Sierra Leone and its neighbors. So definitely that analysis is on, and SLRA, I think they should be in position to answer questions like that as to what is the decision about constructing roads and in prioritizing road areas where roads are needed or not. But I take your point. There has always been this conversation around urban roads. Say, for example, where they make constructing roads in Bow, constructing roads in Kenema versus constructing road in McKinney. So there has been those conversations. But when it comes to economic productivity, I think it's a different conversation altogether.
And will there be a time when citizens will input into even though a priority is the mark, but within that priority, there are also priorities. Will there be a time when the survey will focus on those?
Yes. Well, we have not yet focused on, understanding, like, you actually need a specialized, not just engineering, but the economics of road, for example. So we have not done that. But I think there is need for that investigation, for what is the most efficient way of using resources. And, when you talk about roads, it's not just about where the roads are going, but what's the cost of the roads. So if you have roads that are very expensive, you have fewer roads, constructed of, humongous amounts of money. So it's a bigger conversation. So what we need at this moment is to make the conversation very simple.
Okay.
Let's create jobs. At the moment, we all know that since the war ended, majority of young people languish on the streets. They don't have jobs. And they are the oxygen of political parties. They bite the bullet, they fight, they do the campaigns. In the end, they become disillusioned because most of them are unemployed. So I think it should not just be the priority of government. It should be the priority. It's not just the priority of young people. It should be the priority of government. And if we are priding ourselves to be, a country that, promotes education, after education, what do you need? You need work, because you're preparing for the world of work. So we want this to be a very big conversation in this election. How are we preparing young people for work? How are we increasing their employability, and how are we increasing their employment?
Okay, so this is not the first Citizens Manifesto. How was the previous one received? I mean, were the expectations of the citizens brought to reality? And also, what's the guarantee that with this second Citizens Manifesto, expectations of citizens will be catered for?
I think so. I think, like I said, most of the manifesto priorities are not from planet Mars. They are our daily realities that we just try to organize in a more coherent way and document. So what we are saying, we want the next administration to leave behind a legacy of national cohesion. We want the next administration to leave behind a legacy of youth employment, increasing youth employment. So making policing effective. So these are not this is not rocket science. When you look at the Special Investigation Committee recommendations, they are largely part of what the Citizens Manifesto is suggesting: strengthening relationship or building trust, citizens' trust in security agencies, of course, in general, the institutions that govern our lives.
Okay, so what are some of the strategies you would actually employ to ensure that politicians take these recommendations in the Citizens Manifesto?
Yes, if you want youth employment, you can join us. So I think one of the strategy, like I said, I think I've just mentioned that, is to canvass political parties to adopt this. And we'll be looking for the political party manifestos critically to see whether what citizens want is reflected. Because it's not just about, putting few people in the room to write what you want. And at this time, we are actually going to analyze the political party manifesto. At the moment, we are analyzing President Bio's fulfillment of his manifesto promise. He made about 550 promises. And we're analyzing one by one. By next week, we'll publish that. So now we have what we call manifesto integrity. So you need to know that you do not just conjure things from space. So no, this is why no, narrate them. So you actually need to do a diagnostics of what people need and how how do you provide solutions to those needs.
Also, what are some of the challenges, in putting together this manifesto? What are some of the challenges you experience, also taking into account the previous manifesto?
Yes, so I think we're learning and adapting and moving. So the big challenge, I don't want to mention funding because we had funding from the Irish government, and I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the people of Ireland for supporting the deepening of democracy in Sierra Leone. So in the first place, it's always difficult to reconcile what the experts think is a solution to building society and what ordinary people think is a solution to building society. So sometimes you may think maybe the problem of Sierra Leone is making institutions accountable. And then someone that is lay will say, no, I'm not concerned about that. If my brother goes to power, it's not about how my brother delivers for the rest of Sierra Leone, but how can my brother deliver from my pocket? Mm. So getting citizens, building consensus on how the country can move forward in the context of these opposing views, I think is normally very difficult. We had circumstances where we have been challenged. Why? I need water. Why are you talking about policing? Improving policing. Mm-hmm. This is just your own figment of imagination. But the experts will say there is a correlation between rule of law and economic growth. Mm-hmm. So if you have effective policing, if you have effective justice system, you have economic growth. And in the first place, it is only when you have people in power thinking about delivering results within the law that you can actually deliver results. Mm. But if you say, no, let's forget about rule of law issues. Let us just talk about electricity. You know what a politician will say? I'll give you light. But in the end, you've demanded nothing for behavior change to deliver electricity. Okay,
quickly before Mattia comes in, these are not the first time we've seen sets of recommendations towards building the Sierra Leone we want. TRC recommendations also were there. Now, how will the implementation of these recommendations also from your initiative, how will it be met?
So, the Citizens Manifesto now is going to develop an implementation framework on the side of citizens. In the first place, how are you going to ensure that the citizens of Sierra Leone, what they committed themselves to doing, they actually do? So if you say you're going to throw debt on the streets, you're not going to beg politicians, how is that going to be enforced? So there's going to be an implementation arrangement. And our formula is what we call 6x6x26. That means they have 6 recommendations. We have 6 recommendations, and we hope to achieve those 6 by 2026. So that's the distinction between this one and the last one, because this one is going to have an implementation arrangement, and we're going to ensure that we align the Citizens Manifesto with the next administration's priorities and down to local council level. Because if we say we are going to promote sanitation, which is a devolved function for local councils, basically we are saying we have a willing set of citizens that are ready to support your mandate. How are you going to support citizens? Because coming to think of it, when you talk about sanitation, it's not, if you go to cities that are clean, it's not because cleaning is effective, it's because there is a behavior pattern of not to throw dirt in the street in the first place. Mm-hmm. So we need to see how for example, can the media be supported to educate the public about behavior change, about keeping cities clean. So instead of just buying dump trucks, how are you going to ensure that we have a kind of character, about sanitation?
Abubakar Rashid is asking, could the Citizen Manifesto be available for public consumption?
Definitely. It's online today. It's online today, so you can go IGR website. Yes. So, and that's really an important question because it's meant for you to utilize, to go to the rallies and go ask politicians questions about what are they going to do about water for you. And in fact, if you wear green, you are better off asking SLPP what are you going to do about water. If you wear red, you are better off asking APC what are they going to do about water for you. So, so the Citizens Manifesto lays out these policy priorities, and we all need to achieve it together. So we're just playing our own little part, but we need to all work concertedly about it.
And would there be a nationwide sensitization or popularization of this manifesto from IGL?
Yes, yes, there will be. What we are doing, we're creating an app, and in that app, our ambition is whoever is a smartphone user, you should be in position to say, what is the Citizens Manifesto saying for me? So we want to make this election one of the most innovative across Africa. So we're having a situation where we're uploading an app in whoever is a smartphone carrier. You should be in position to say, what is the SLPP in the SLPP manifesto for health, and definitely that will be relayed to you.
Okay, so finally, in your last words, how do you think we can make the 2023 elections meaningful?
Well, so I don't know if you have 6 hours for that, for my response. but there are many things. So if we stop fighting, we'll make the elections meaningful. Election is just a way of, like I said, electing one person, and either at the district level, at the constituency level, for them to rule us. And what we are doing in the Citizens Manifesto, we've put together a family of proposals which should help that person deliver results or become more responsive to what citizens want. So to make elections meaningful, we should actually forget about ethnic-based ballots and get more focus around policy-based voting.
All right, thank you very much, Andula Valley, for being part of the program this morning.
Okay, so this is where we end today's edition of Wake Up Sierra Leone. Our quote for today says, "I dream of the realization of the unity of Africa, whereby its leaders combine in their efforts to solve the problems of this continent. I dream of our vast deserts, our forests, all of our great wildernesses." And it comes from late Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa.
I want to say thanks to our sponsor, Local Commercial Bank, for their support to this program. Continue to stay with AYV throughout the day as we have other exciting programs coming up to meet next week with interesting topics here on Wake Up Sierra Leone. We've been your presenters. I am Bokari Matia.
And I am Elizabeth Momo. Have a lovely weekend.